right, so let's get working on our little voodoo guy. He was based in burlap, and then I applied the basic pattern for him. And one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush some highlighting on him with some bleached sand. And now I even put the little line for the stitch lines on his arms and legs and face, so I can start treating those areas as their own areas, separate areas, not just one big arm. And so I'm going to say "and so" a lot. Apparently that's my new fill. So I'm just going to dry brush some bleach sand on the sections of his little arms. That looks really bright. That's okay, it'll be fine. Let's go down here to his little legs. They're in two sections also. They have some stitching that's going to be going on them. And this will tone down a little bit when we do the shading on him. That's already kind of toned down a little bit here. Let's get his other little leg done. All right. He's a chunky little guy too. Look at those fat legs. And reload again so I can do his other arm. This one you see a little bit more of. It's not tucked behind his body. He's waving, "Hey, how's it going? I'm thinking about you." All right. And now we're going to go to his little body, and we're going to dry brush on that. And around the heart. Just want to give him some dimension a little bit. I know it looks bad right now. It'll be okay. Trust me, I haven't lied to you yet. I just want to scrub this highlighting all over his little belly and body. Slowly but surely getting there. Hopefully you're not using a really small brush to do your dry brushing, because that would take you a while. This is a 12. You could get away with a 12, 14, or 16 would be great. All right, and now his face. Go under his little mouth. And around his little eyes. Okay. All right. Here we go. He looks kind of scary already, doesn't he? So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to float some shading on our guy with burnt umber. Alright, so let's get out a big brush and some burnt umber, and let's float some shading on this guy. See if I have a good floating day or a bad floating day. I'm going to go under his hat on his face first. Let's see. Looks like it's going to be one of those days that I use my mop brush a lot. So that's not necessarily a bad day. I'm going to go ahead and go on his arm and his body under his face. I'm going to come from this way, I think. Be a little easier. And another one, I'm going to just mop a little bit. So you want to keep it soft. You don't want it to be a harsh line of burnt umber. You want it to be a nice, soft shading. Let's go on his legs, under his little belly. Alright, and again I'm going to come in with my mop brush just to soften that and blend it out just a little bit more. How about if we go, let's go on his arms next to his body. And this has that little V area right there, so you want to make sure you kind of walk that color out in that V area a little bit. I'm going to go on his other arm. Oh, he's starting to have some shape now. I want to go on his body, like the lower half. So I'm going to start about halfway up on one side, come all the way down, and that means that it's going to be a back-to-back float there next to the floats that are on his legs. Right. I want to go under his little mouth. I need a little bit more water in my brush. It's a little dry. All right, let's go on next to these where the stitches are going to be. If that makes any sense. I'm going to go towards the outside edge. On them, that's on the legs and on the arms. And I haven't quite decided if I'm going both sides yet. So we'll see what I come up with. I also want to go around the heart. So that will pop off a little bit. And it's another opportunity to use my mop brush. We need to do the stitch line on his face. And I do believe those are going to become back-to-back floats on his arms and legs. I not only believe it, I'm making it happen. So that makes it easy. Now you know where you're going with this float. You're just going to go a back-to-back float on the arms and the legs. We also need to separate these legs just a little bit. And I think that was a wise choice to do back-to-backs on there. Not that I'm bragging or anything. Oops, a little too dark. And I think I need to erase some of that right there. Okay, and couple more places. You ought to know if I say one more, I really mean a couple more. I am going to do that back-to-back float down the face. And then I also want to go on the bottom of his chin, so about halfway up the side. And then let's get the other side. Okay, he's looking pretty cool. And then we also want to go around the eyes. I'm going to go ahead and go to a smaller flat brush, maybe like a 1/2 inch. Yeah, this is a 1/2 inch. You still want to blend it out. You want it to be a soft float. So I'm going to go to this eye first. And I'm going to start, doesn't really matter where I start. All right. One down. And And let's get the other one going. All right. Oh yeah, he's looking cute already. So I am going to come back and float just a little bit of highlighting here and there. And that's going to be with bleach sand. And I don't want it to be stand out a whole lot. But I'm going to go across the top of his arms. And this should tone down as it dries. And let's go on the top of this arm. It's a little easier than that other one was. I also want to come, you know, I did his belly. I did halfway down, so I'm going to come. Oh, that's a little bright. So I'm going to come about halfway down with this highlight. Right. Oops. And let's see, let's go above his little mouth. And I am going to go right across that back-to-back float that I did. It'll be okay. And then let's do right here on his head, like at his temples. Okay, let's see, where else do we want to go? Let's go along the bottom of this arm, the bottom of his right arm, or the right side where we are. And I'm going to go on the bottom of his little legs, just a little bit to brighten that up. Not a whole lot. All right. He's looking pretty good. I would like to come back and brighten up the highlighting a little bit here and there with dry brushes of warm white. So just a little bit of warm white in your favorite dry brush and your favorite way to dry brush. I'm going to go right across in the top of his arm right here a little bit. Just want to pop it up a little bit. And I'm going to go on his legs in that whiter part. on both legs. And let's get his other little arm here a little bit brighter. Go a little in there too. Let's go on the bottom of this bigger part of the arm. And then a little bit on his belly here. He does have that little stitchy scar thing there. So we'll go right into that area. And just a little bit on his head. Look right in here. Again, in the area, I guess you would call his temples. And just a little bit above his mouth. All right. Now, don't wash your brush out because he does have some little cheeks. Okay, so the little cheeks, we're going to dry brush on with Coral Blush. Nice, soft little cheeks, because every zombie has nice, soft little cheeks, right? It's okay if you get up into the eyes, because we're going to paint those in. Okay, cool. All right, so let's go ahead and paint one of his eyes in with lavender. Got to stay true to my Halloween colors, right? And we'll do the other one with Irish moss. And I think I'm going to do the bigger one in lavender and the smaller one in Irish moss. So just a quick base coat. This is where you cover up where you got the cheeks in the eye. Seems like every time I record a video, I have a stuffy nose. Maybe I'm allergic to videos. All right. You can straighten up your eye too, or round it out, not straighten it. Kind of make it the right shape. One big purple eye. And then one little green eye. And I would probably give these 2 coats. I don't often give 2 coats on anything, but this I'll go ahead and give 2 coats. If you could only see my tongue right now. It's like sticking out the side of my mouth. Gotta hold it just right to do this. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and base in the heart with Country Red. So just a nice red heart. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to step away for a moment from taping and give these each a second coat of paint. There's no need for you to watch me do that. Really don't need to watch me do it the first time. But, oh well, here you are. And there we go. Almost got my little heart based in. Alright, so I'm going to go do a second coat and then I'll be back. You know, as long as we're here and before we get too far down the line, I want to go ahead and float some burnt umber under the little stitch that's on his belly. So just a quick soft float of burnt umber, because that needs to stand out a little bit. There, that'll be better. Alright, he looks kind of creepy right now. So as long as we're base coating, I want to go ahead and base coat his hat in with graphite. And I'm going to base his hat band in with spiced pumpkin, I believe. So hat is graphite, hat band is spiced pumpkin. Let's get those done and we'll be back. Okay, so hat's base coated in graphite and the hat band is spiced pumpkin. So now I want to go ahead and put the detail pattern on. I want to put on the pattern for the playing card and the bone, for the inside of the eyes, and for these little stick pins that are stuck in the heart. And you can go ahead and put on the pattern for the lettering if you'd like. So we'll do that and return and see what we can come up with next. Alright, let's get out a smaller liner brush. This is a number 2 and I think I'm going to use that. And I'm going to thin down some of my burnt umber and liner consistency, because all I want to do is I want to line through the center of these back-to-back floats. So you want to stay up on the tip of your brush and as straight up and down as you can to kind of keep it a nice thin line. Don't try to hurry. No need to hurry. We always used to say, watch where you're going, not where you've been. I also want to line this little stitchy thing on his belly. Just wanted to reinforce those seams, because that's what they are. It's just the seams where he was sewn together. And let's go through the middle of his face. And we also want to line his little mouth. Okay. So now we want to go ahead and line that stitching, and you can put the pattern on if you'd like, or you can just kind of look at it and follow along. I'm going to use a smaller brush. This is actually a 6/0. You could use a 10/0, just anything smaller. And again, I'm going to use that thin down burnt umber, although I will be coming back and lining a little highlight on it. So you know, don't forget about that. But let's go ahead and give him some stitches on here. Don't make them all the same. Looks like he needs a nose to me. He doesn't have a stitch on his chin, so I'm going to give him a couple. Just because I want to. Mouth is pretty simple. Don't forget, I said I was going to line some highlighting on this. Now, I did add a stitch here where his arm is connected to his body. So just take your time and line some nice stitches. All with thin burnt umber. A couple of stitches to connect his legs to his body. He's starting to look cute now. He's starting to look like one of those little voodoo looking dolls, right? Not that I've ever really seen one in person. Don't know if I want to. Okay, we're getting there. I'm not going to do the stitching on the heart just yet. I want to do some work on the heart first. Almost done. All right, I think that looks pretty cute in a voodoo doll sort of way. Okay, so let's go to work on his eyeballs. Oh no, let's go ahead and line highlighting on some of that stitching. I'm going to do that, do that with thin, warm white. And this is going to be, I'm going to go on the little line that's separated or define the seams. And then I'm also going to go on the stitches. I just think that looks really cool and it helps it. And you don't cover the whole line, just hit through the center, kind of. And that just makes those stitches stand out a little bit more. It gives them a little dimension. And that's all we're looking for. You don't want it to just be flat. So you're probably glad I made these kind of big stitches. Hopefully you did too. I hope you didn't make itty bitty little stitches that you have to now line highlighting on, because I know what you're doing then. You're kind of going grumbling. It really does make a difference. Okay, I think the next thing we'll work on is we'll go ahead and base in the bone with bleach sand and the playing card with warm white. Sound like a plan? Sounds like a plan to me. Just a little bit left on this mouth. All right, so I'm going to base in the bone with bleach sand and the playing card with warm white. Right, so I think you can probably tell that with this video you're going through the creative process with me. I don't have directions written down. I'm just kind of creating and pulling colors as I go. So as I was basing in the playing card and the bone, I happened to think, well, you know what? I want to dry brush just a little bit of that cheek color, that coral blush, into the bottom of his belly. Just, I don't know, it just feels like it needs a little bit of color down there. So I know we did some warm white highlighting, but I just feel like his little belly down the bottom here could use a little bit of color too. So not a whole lot. Just that little half moon area in the bottom of his belly could use that. All right, so the next thing we are going to work on for sure is going to be the eyes. All right, let's work on this purple button. The first thing I want to do is I want to dry brush a little bit of highlighting on it, and I'm going to dry brush that highlighting in the center and then also in that rim of the button. And I'm going to do that with Purple Cow. And it's not going to be real bright, but we'll bump it up again in a few. So I'm just going to dry brush. I'm going right over where those holes are, because we're going to paint those in with black, I believe. So it won't be a problem to cover that highlight up. So just around the rim. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to get out some dioxazine purple, and I'm going to float shading on my button with a very well blended out float of diox purple. I'm going to do that all the way around the outside edge, so on the edge of the rim. Here. And I'm going to do half, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to float half of the inside edge of that rim, because that way I don't have to worry about wiping it out so quickly when I go to finish. The button. Guess I could go to finish the rest of the sentence. That would be good. So I'm going to finish up that float around the outside of the rim. And the float on the inside of that rim to form that ridge of the button. You know, they always kind of have a depressed center. All right, so I want to let that dry, so I'm going to move over to the green button, and I'm going to dry brush highlighting on it with Moon Yellow. It's going to be a little harder to get on that rim, but it'll be okay because you can kind of fix it and clarify it when you do your shading. So don't panic if it doesn't show up quite as well as you'd like. I'm going to go in the center, and then I'm going to go around the outside edge. So basically, I end up kind of dry brushing over the whole button because it's so much smaller. And shading on the green button, I'm going to do it the same way I did on the purple button. I'm going to do it with Black Forest Green. So Black Forest Green. I'm going around the left side. And then I'm going to go and make the ridge, the depressed center. So if anybody is going to be depressed, it's going to be this little guy. That pin's stuck in him. And let's finish this off on the other side. And I wiped out a little bit of the shading on the bottom there, so I'll put it back. And now I'm going to do the inside edge. Alright, I'm going to hit this with a mop brush just to soften it a little bit. Now I want to deepen this inside a little, the shading on the inside of the purple one. So I'm going to come back with another float of dioxazine purple, just because I want it to be just a tad darker. All right. Yep, that's better. Yes, much better. Now what I want to do is I want to highlight the inside edge of that outer rim, if that makes any sense at all. I'm going to do that with a nice soft float of purple cow. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. Looking good. And I'm going to do the same thing to the green button with a float of moon yellow. Again, it's a smaller button, so keep that float a little bit smaller, not as wide as the one was on your purple button. Try to keep it in a circle too. I didn't. So I'll just come back and fix that with a float shading. Fix that inside circle a little bit with a float of Black Forest Green again. Easy peasy. Fix it up. I didn't say it was going to make it look better. I just said I was going to fix it up. Okay. I really feel like there needs to be some deeper shading on the body of the guy around the button. So I'm going to add a shadow with my liner brush with thin down burnt umber, just because I want it to pop off the background just a little more. So let's see how this works. Is that going to make it? Yeah, I think that'll do it. Cool. And we'll do the same thing to the purple one. Just to make it pop off the body a little bit more. Okay, we want to go ahead and add our buttonholes. We're going to do that with lamp black. So you want to get that out, not too much. And you could dot these with the back end of a brush, but then you have to keep your hands out of them. So I'm just going to paint them in so they'll dry faster. On the purple button, they're a pretty good size. I guess if you wanted to, you could stencil them. You wanted to get out a little stencil. And then the green button has 4 buttonholes. They're not quite as big as the purple ones, obviously, because the button isn't quite as big. So I think I need to make this buttonhole just a smidge bigger. Okay, there we go. Now what I want to do is I want to highlight those rims a little bit further. So I'm going to use my liner brush, and I'm going to pick up some purple cow, and then I'm going to pick up some warm white just to make a lighter value of purple cow. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very roughly line a bit of a highlight on the rim of this button. And I'm only doing it like from 3 to 6 and 9 to 12. If you are familiar with old clock faces. I'm going to do the same thing with moon yellow on the green one. Same 9 to 12 and 3 to 6. And then what I want to do is I want to line the thread, and I'm going to line the thread with warm white. Just a little liner brush and a little bit of warm white, then down just a little bit, not a whole lot. And the thread, if you look at your pattern, is like curved. And then on the purple one, it's like there's a stray piece of thread hanging out. And then on the green one, it's just normal crisscross. And I do want to take a little bit of lamp black and a little bit of warm white just to make a gray. And I'm going to touch a little bit of shading right at the base of that thread where it goes into the hole. That goes for this green one also. All right, he's looking pretty good. Let's go down and work on our heart. Now our heart, I want to dry brush some highlighting on it. I'm gonna go ahead and do Coral Blush, which was our cheek and belly color. And so we just want to get a nice little dry brush highlight on there. Looks pretty good. And then I'm not going to wash this brush out. I'm going to pick up just a little bit of warm white just to make a little bit lighter value of that coral blush. And I'm going to dry brush just a little bit of this lighter color just in the top of that heart. We're going to float shading all the way around the inside edge of that heart with black plum. And let's get these top All right. Easy peasy. Don't get your hand in your eyes. In your little guy's eyes. If you want to stick them in your eye, that's okay. I'm going to walk this shading a little bit in the bottom in that point. Now there's some stitching that holds the heart on, and we're going to do that again with our burnt umber first, and then we'll highlight it with warm white. So just look at your pattern, or put the pattern on, it's okay. No shame in that. Just add that stitching. And you can stitch it any way you'd like. If you don't like the way I stitched it, change it, it's all right. Let's see, we got one more over here. And then again, we have one of those little loose threads here. And I think I'll make it a little longer. And then what I want to do is I want to line a little highlight on each of those stitches with warm white. Just like we did the other ones. To make them stand out a little bit more. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and go to his hat. Now his hat is based in graphite. So we're going to get out some desert turquoise. And we're going to dry brush some highlighting on that hat with desert turquoise. Using my dry brush quite a lot. Getting quite an array of colors on the back of my hand again. So I'm going to especially dry brush this highlighting on the brim. We'll come and lighten this up a little bit. I want to do a little bit in the inside where it turns behind his head. Let me back up a little bit so I can get his hat, whole hat on there. Okay, so brim and just a little bit on those inside. And then we're going to dry brush the whole rest of the hat, just to give it a little dimension. Don't wash your brush out when you're done. So just desert turquoise dry brushing. A little bit more. I was hoping my brush would hold out for the rest of the hat, but nope, gotta load it up. Okay, so now I want to pick up just a little bit of warm white on my dirty brush, and I'm going to dry brush just a little bit brighter highlighting. And that's going to go mainly in the center of this hat brim. And then over on this side of the hat. All right, maybe a little bit down here. We're going to float shading on the hat with lamp black. I'm going to start first by shading around the bone and the playing card. Just to pop those out. Okay, and get around the bone. A little tedious, but it'll be okay. So this little area right here between the bone and the card kind of gets just filled up with lamp black. That's okay. I'm going to float on the hat next to his head. To make that go behind his head. And let's see, I'm going to go on the hat, top of the hat next to the hat band. Here's another one of those V areas that you can fill up with a float of lamp black. All right, let's go back to this part of the hat. And let's float on the part that turns around behind his head next to the hat brim. And I think we can go ahead and float all the way around the top, out the top of the hat, around the outside edge. Okay, I know it's wet right now and you can't really see it, but it's going to make it look really good. I'm going to go on these outside edges of the hat brim, just to round those a little bit. And I also want to go across the top edge of the hat brim. Okay. So I do want to do a little bit of highlighting, and that's going to be just along the lower edge of the hat brim. And I'm going to do that with some very well blended out desert turquoise. I want it to be a nice, soft float. Maybe not that soft. Yeah, I think that's a little too soft. So pick up a little bit more paint. See if we can see it now. Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right. So let's work on our bone. We're going to dry brush some highlighting on our bone with warm white. The bone has a little divot. Let me see. Just a little divot in there. So you want to make sure you know where that is. So just some straight warm white. I'm going to dry brush down the middle of the shaft of the bone, and obviously I'm going to get it all over the hat. Not what I intended. But down the shaft. You can run into the card because it's based in warm white. And then I want to go into the little ball part on either end of the bone. Okay, as long as we're dry brushing some warm white, I just want to dry brush. I know it's based in warm white, but I just want to dry brush that card a little bit, just to make it a little more opaque. So while we let that dry, let's go ahead and dry brush our hat band with Moon Yellow. It was based in Spiced Pumpkin. So I'm going to dry brush some Moon Yellow, especially in that little center area there where the pin is kind of stuck through. You want to make sure you get that nice and bright. Let's go back to our bone, and we are going to float shading on our bone with burnt umber. It's a dirty old bone. So I'm going to go down both sides. I'm going to start up here at the little ball part and come all the way down. That left side. Kind of soften that. I'm going to go inside that little divot. And then I'm going to do the other side of the bone, I'm also going to go next to the card. The bone is very dirty. So I'm going to let that dry. I want to float some shading on my card, and I'm going to do that by picking up some turquoise blue, just a corner load of turquoise blue, and then I also want to pick up just a teeny tiny touch of lamp black. So I kind of want to have a gray that airs on the side of blue. So I'm going to float this nice soft turquoise blue black mix across the bottom of the card. I think I need to clean my mop brush a little bit. And I'm also going to go up that back side of the card. So the card gets a little dirty looking too. Now what I can do is I can go back to my bone and I can float a highlight on those little, the ball parts of the bone with warm white. I'm also going to go under that little divot and do the other side of the bone. Probably should have just turned it over instead of making a mess. It'll be okay. That's what I always say. It'll be okay. So I'm going to dry this just a minute, and then I'm going to put the pattern on for my playing card. Now we are going to come in and deepen the shading at the base of the bone in the card to sink it back behind that hat band. Alright, so I want to put the pattern on for my card. You can make it any suit, any card you want. Now, I made mine the Ace of Spades. Okay. But I'm thinking I might want to pull some red up there. So I might make it the Ace of Hearts. Who knows? Who knows what I want to do? I'm going to get my little A on there. Okay. Alright, I'm going to leave it Ace of Spades. And let's go ahead and paint in the spade with lamp black. Shouldn't take me this long, I don't know why. Okay. And then you can paint in the A. Now it's a little bit fatter. All right. So it's just an A, nothing fancy unless you want it to be. And then I'm going to bring the red in with just a little border line of country red around the card, just to bring another color in there. It looks too empty otherwise. So just a quick little line of country red around the border of this card. I do want to line a little highlight on that stripe and also on the A, of course. Not too much. And then I also want to line a dry brush a little highlight of warm white on the spade part. So just a little bit of a warm white highlight on the spade that's on the card. A little too much. A little bit. I'm going to pump up this on the bone a little bit too. Just add a little bit more highlight there. Okay, so now I need to deepen this shading that's on the bottom of the bone and across the bottom of the card. So I'm going to come in with burnt umber, a float of burnt umber. I'm going to darken that where it's next to the hat band and next to the card. And then I also am going to float this burnt umber across the bottom of the card where it's tucked into the hat band. All right. We're getting there. I think we need to work on our hat band a little bit. We did the dry brush of moon yellow. We need to do a float of moon yellow across the top. And it gets a little tricky when you get into those little tight corners. But you can do it, I know you can. And this goes on bright, but it will tone down. Now if you wanted to add stripes or something to your hat band, that would be great. I think I will add some little pinstripes of Irish moss on the hat band. If you want to add bigger stripes, if you want to add checks, dots, whatever you like. It's your little hat band. Now I'm going to add stripes. And I'm going to get on camera to do that. They don't have to show up a whole lot, but obviously But they kind of look neon on it against that orange and yellow. Okay. Just want to bring in that green color from somewhere else. We're going to float some shading on our hat band with Heritage Brick. So slate gray and a liner brush. You want to line those pins. They can be a little thicker. And yes, we are going to line highlighting and shading on them. So you've got a pin. Well, probably should have made that go a little bit more in the center of that divot. Okay. And then we have this one that's in the hat. So I want to line a highlight on the pins with warm white. And these I'm going to line the highlight coming from the head of the pin down. And then on the one that's in the hat, it's going to go from the head of the pin and then to the opposite side. And you kind of want to take it all the way to the point. And then you're also going to take a little bit of lamp black and add a touch of slate gray to make a little bit lighter value of lamp black. And where the pin goes into the heart, you're going to line that little darker color. And also at the other end where it goes into the little top, I'm going to line a little bit of that dark lamp black slate gray. On the one that's in the hat, you want to line this on either side of where it goes underneath the fabric. And also where it goes into the top of the pin. So I'm going to come with my Heritage Brick. I'm going to thin it down just a little bit with my liner brush. And I'm going to line a shadow under this pin with some thinned Heritage Brick. And that means I'm also going to go underneath the little head of the pin. I'm going to do it on the heart also. It's going to be black plum till I get to the body, and then that will be burnt umber. So thin down some black plum. And just line a shadow under that pin. Where it's over the heart. And then you're going to need a little bit of burnt umber thin down. And that goes where the pin is over the body. You want to line a little bit of the shadow and then go under the head of the pin. Okay, so now we have to decide what color we want our pin heads to be. And, I'm thinking, see, we need some purple. Maybe we will paint them with lavender. I think that would be nice to bring that color into the piece again. So just give yourself some nice little pin heads. Well, they're not that little. They're ovals. And of course we're going to line shading and line the highlight on them. Let's just pick up a little bit of warm white on our liner brush. I'm just going to add a little highlight, warm white, on each of those pin heads. Now I kind of feel like our little guy needs an eyebrow or something. So let me sketch one on here and see if I'm feeling right. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think he does. So, burnt umber, just like the rest of our stitching. And this is actual stitching, it's not applicating anything on, it's just giving him a little eyebrows, just a little bit more character to his face. And of course, that's got to get a little bit of warm white highlight on it. Just like our other stitching. All right, so let's look at this guy and see what else we can do to him. I think I want to pop the highlight up on his brim a little bit. So I'm going to dry brush just a little bit more warm white on there. Not a lot. Get a little closer. Okay, maybe a little bit more over here. A bit over here. And I think I want to pop up the highlight on the button rims. So I'm going to take my liner brush and warm white and just line a little bit brighter highlight on top of those other highlights that we did. Okay. And how about just a little bit of highlight on the heart? I also want to darken this area right here. So I'm going to float that again with burnt umber. Just this V area right here. I'm going to do that on both sides. Yeah, I think that looks better. All right, so the lettering. I'm going to let you get off easy this time. You can do your lettering with a black Identipen or with a black paint marker. Let's see if I can get my black paint marker to work. Yep. Okay, so just be very careful. And I like to do all my verticals first. This is a paint pen. Lots of verticals. Okay, now I'll go back and do my horizontals. There aren't quite as many of those. Okay, you want to be sure to let that paint pen dry before you do anything else to it. You don't want to smudge it. So I'm going to go ahead and add my hanger and some Halloween beads, and let's just see how cute this guy turns out. All right, so here we go. Here's our little, I called him a zombie guy, but he's really a voodoo guy. And I think he turned out pretty cute. He's not a hard paint to do. And I hope you enjoyed it. So I'll see you next month with our spring piece. Thanks for joining me, and thanks for being a part of Halloween Addicts Anonymous 2024.